All right, Grandpa. Tell me about the three sisters that immigrated over here illegally.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, my grandmother was born in a, well, not really even in a village. She was born on a farm outside of a village, which in turn was near the city of Krakow in Poland. Krakow is down near the Czech border. It's in the southern part of Poland. At that time, Poland was partitioned between Russia, Germany, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. She was in the Austro-Hungarian Empire part of it. And the Yatkovskis were gentry. Now, in gentry means they were kind of high class people. It doesn't have so much to do with money, although they had some, but it has to do with class. And throughout history, her family had always been gentry, and they from what I understand, they were probably in the Middle Ages. They produced a lot of knights and stuff like that. That was the class they were in. Okay. Now my grandmother and her sisters were raised to be ladies. You know, they did needlework and stuff like that. Well, in Poland, as in most of Europe, you have primogeniture. Primogeniture means that the oldest son inherits everything. So when her father died, her oldest brother inherited the estate. He sent his sisters out to work with the peasants. They didn't like that.
So wait, he inherited everything, and his sisters, who had this nice life before,
Yeah, they had
all
a
of a
nice
sudden
life
had to
when
work
their
with
father was alive. But when their older brother took over, he made them go out and work with the peasants. The nice life was over.
Did he not like his sisters?
I don't know. I know very little about this man except what my grandmother told me.
Yeah.
And I do know that she told my mother during World War II, she said, "I hope the Germans kill him." So anyhow, she and her two sisters came to America. Actually, one of the other brothers, at least one of the, and it might have been two of the other brothers, came too later on. Not the older brother; he stayed there. I mean, he still owned the estate. But anyway, the three sisters came together, and they came illegally. They came on some kind of a tramp steamer, which let them off somewhere out on the coast, on the east coast. I don't even know where, but it was illegal. So she never could apply for citizenship or anything.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So now the three sisters are here in America, and I assume they got some jobs somewhere. I don't know. But anyhow, they happen to run into three brothers, three Polish brothers. Well, the Polacks, unlike the Italian side of my family, the Polacks are very practical people. They're not romantic people, but they're very practical. Well, there's three brothers, and there's three sisters. Well, we might as well all get married. Now, how did they pair up? Well, I don't know, but knowing how the Polacks think, they probably either did it by age or height. You know,
By height, they get in a line. Okay, so that's your wife. This one's my wife.
Yeah, I would think so, because the Polacks were not romantic. The Italians were romantic. The Polacks, no. It's all practical stuff. So they all get married, and the one that my grandmother marries, she has two kids too. That was my Uncle Joe and my Aunt Mary. Well, now, her husband gets killed in the mine, because they all wind up working in the mines. Because when you came over here from Europe at that time, you had to take a job like that. They're dangerous jobs, and it didn't pay much. But that's what you pretty much had to do. And he got killed in the mines. Now I have to swing over to the man who really is my grandfather. Okay, now the man who is really my grandfather is a cousin of those three guys that married the three Polish sisters. Okay, now he came from the northern part of Poland, near, and again he didn't really even live in a village. He lived on a farm because they owned a farm near the little town of Staney in the far northern part of Poland, and that part of Poland happened to be in the Russian sector. Okay. And they were not gentry. They were peasants, but they were what the Russians would call kulak. A kulak is a guy who from the peasant class, but he owns land. And as a matter of fact, my grandfather told me that his farm was bigger than my grandmother's farm.
Huh.
It could be a little misleading though, because his farm was way up in the north of Poland, and her farm was down near the Czech border. And not only is the weather better down there, but I think that the land is better down there too. But anyhow, his family's farm was even bigger than her family's farm. But in that sector of Poland, the bond that was controlled by the Russians, the oldest son in the family had to serve in the Tsar's army. Well, my grandfather was the second son, and there were quite a few sons in that family. The oldest son was named Felix, and I guess that's how I got my middle name, really.
Huh.
And Felix came home one day and he said to my grandfather, he said, "I hope you like being a soldier because I'm going to America." So my grandfather says, we said, "Well, I'm coming with you." So they came. They happened to have come legally. They got the right papers and everything, and they came legally. And in fact, I think they came in through the port of Baltimore.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But anyhow, when they got here, his brother Felix was a rover. My grandfather wasn't that by nature, but his brother was. So they did all kind of jobs. They were lumberjacks up in Canada. They worked on the iron ore barges on the Great Lakes. They worked the copper mines out in Colorado. They worked anthracite coal mines. They worked in Carnegie steel mills in Pittsburgh. But Felix, the older brother, after a while would get tired of that job, and he'd tell my father, "Well, I'm tired of this, I want to move on." And my grandfather didn't particularly want to move on, but he didn't want to lose track of his brother, so he'd always go with his brother. And in fact, my grandfather told me that when they were working for Carnegie in Pittsburgh, that my grandfather had got to be the foreman of one of the furnaces, and he had to leave that job because Felix wants to go somewhere else. Okay, so he's roaming around the country for a few years with Felix, doing all these jobs, and he gets a letter from his two surviving cousins, and they tell him that their brother got killed in the mine, and they say, well, and he left a wife who has two kids, and she cooks good. She's a nice, strong lady, and she got a $500 insurance policy on her brother. Why don't you come and marry her? Well,
You never even met the girl.
no, he never saw her. No, he never saw her. So he thought, okay, and he came and he married her, and he became my grandfather, and they had 3 children, the oldest of which was my Aunt Blanche, and then my father was next, and then the youngest was my Uncle Stutz, whose real name was Stanley, which after the name got corrupted, his name was Stanley Staney.
Stanley Staney?
Yeah.
That's funny. I almost thought about, if I had a kid, I'd name him Stanley Staney. That way, people wouldn't mess up the last name because they'd have to differentiate it from the first.
Yeah, that might be an idea.
Because no one would name their kid Stanley Stanley.
No.
Right? That's funny.